I had a homeless situation.
No problem. All right, good evening. Welcome to this evening's City Council meeting. Special thanks again to Susan Miyamoto in the back for providing our prelude music. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Let's start with our invocation. Marty Treckman of Grace Presbyterian Church, followed by the flag salute. And if Miss Alexander would lead us in the flag salute tonight.
Will you join me in prayer? God of peace, we come to you this hour asking for your blessing and help as we are gathered together. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would clearly show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. We ask you to preside over this meeting, dear God. Even if we have different opinions, give us unity of spirit. Help us to each listen politely as others share their points of view. Help us to work as a unified team in combining ideas for a great outcome. Help us to work as a whole rather than individuals trying to promote their own agendas. May we have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and work together on our shared mission. In the scriptures, you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, I pray for our mayor, for the various levels of city officials, and in particular, for this assembled council. I'm asking that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, and personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Temecula. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen. Place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. Can we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Alexander.
I'm here.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Mayor Ron.
Here.
Councilmember Schwank.
Here.
Councilmember Stewart.
Here.
Okay, and we are going to go a little bit out of order because of some changes in the state law. So we will be starting off today's meeting with the redistricting public hearing. And it's item number 11 on our agenda. So if we can have a report, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. As noted, the public hearing notice did reflect 7 a.m. and we are obligated to, for this particular item, to go ahead and start immediately as soon as possible upon calling the meeting to order. Every 10 years, local governments use new census data to redraw their district lines to reflect how local populations have changed. Assembly Bill 849 from 2019 and Assembly Bill 1276 from 2020 require cities and counties to engage communities in the redistricting process by holding public hearings and doing public outreach. In Temecula, the City Council is responsible for drawing council districts, and the redistricting process must be completed by April 17, 2022. Tonight, the City Council is conducting the third of its 4 required public hearings for the purposes of redistricting. In addition to the 4 required public hearings, the city has also held additional public meetings with our board and commissions, as well as engaged the community through print and social media and the community newsletter that was delivered to all residential households in the city. The community continues to have the ability to submit comments, maps, and/or other information throughout our entire process up until the maps are actually adopted. The webpage indicating how to participate in both English and in Spanish remains current and actually has interactive links for existing and proposed maps. With that, I will go ahead and turn the presentation over to our consultant, Shalise Tilton from National Demographic Corporation, to go ahead and walk us through our third public hearing.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. I'm going to move quickly through the rules and regulations. You've seen them now several times, and they're in the PowerPoint and available on the website. Next slide, please, or am I advancing the slides here? Okay. Oh, okay, next slide, okay. This is our third public hearing. We'll be meeting back again here on March 8th for final selection and adoption of a map. The law requires we complete the process by April 17th. And as your city clerk, Randy Joel has outlined, it's required by state law that we readjust the boundaries once the 2020 census official data is available. Next slide. When we are adjusting the boundaries, we must have equal population. It doesn't have to be exact population. There can be a 10% difference, but no more than a 10% difference between the least populated district and the greatest populated district. We also can't draw lines in a way that would dilute the voting strength of our protected class groups, and we can't draw lines based solely on race. The Fair Maps Act sets forth the priorities that we must follow. Maps must be geographically contiguous. Maps must respect communities of interest and undivided neighborhoods whenever it's practicable to do so, easily identifiable boundaries when it's practicable to follow, compactness, and we cannot draw maps to favor a political party. Once we've met the federal and state laws, then we can look at other things such as minimizing voter deferrals. Those are the voters that are shifted to different election cycles. Respecting voters' choices, if it's possible to draw a map to avoid pairing council members, and we've met all the other criteria, then we present that option. Future population growth, we can slightly underpopulate, still staying within that 10% deviation if we know there's going to be growth in a particular area, and preserving the core of existing districts. Let's go on to the next slide. Shown on the screen for you are the existing districts applied with today's 2020 official prisoner-adjusted census data. The total deviation exceeds the 10% at 14.75%. District 1 is overpopulated at 5.98%. So it would need to lose some territory. We have our highest citizen voting age population at 29% in District 5. We're seeing that's fairly consistent in all the maps, around 27-29%. Is the highest we can get. So we don't really see a highly concentrated geographical area of our Latino community or any of our other protected class groups. So we're not able to achieve a 50% majority district. In three of the maps that I'm presenting tonight, we do reach a majority minority. So when you combine all of the protected class groups, all the non-white citizen voting age population, we are able to achieve that in three of the maps. Next slide. Draft A was drafted to represent minimal change, minimal disruption to the voters who are used to their districts by now, and also those that will be deferred to a different election year. In each of the in drafts A, B, and C, there are no council pairings, meaning that there are no these particular maps would not present a head-to-head contest between seated incumbents. The deviation on draft A is 5.7%, well within the allowable deviation. The change that you see is in District 3 with the border moves southerly to DePorto Road, just between Margarita Road and Meadows Parkway. And then we see some change in D2 over on the east border to include a portion of Red Hawk Golf Course and those homes west of, is it Tiburcio? Wasn't sure how to pronounce it. Tiburcio. Yeah, yeah, the homes west of that drive. Next slide. Draft B is also a minimal change, just showing a little bit different options for population balance. There's no council pairings, deviation of 6.36%. The highest Latino citizen voting age population is 29% in District 5. And District 5 is also our majority minority district. The change here is in District 3, the southern boundary follows entirely along De Portola Road, kind of smooth that out a little bit. And D2, the southern boundary moves, in District 2, the southern boundary change is moved southerly to Temecula Creek. Next slide. Draft C is more of a change from the existing map, and was used, the neighborhood associations, homeowners associations was used as a base for this map to try to follow as closely as possible. There are no council pairings. There is a deviation of 2.49%, well within the allowable 10. The highest Latino with citizen voting age population is District 5 at 27%. There are various changes that are made that are delineated here on the slide, and I'd be happy to ask questions about those. Each one just kind of describes what the changes are. Next slide. We did get a late submittal from a member of the public, and I was able to draw this up this afternoon. This map, it was submitted by Martha Howard. There are 2 pairings in District 2. The deviation is 1.22%. The highest Latino citizen voting age population is in District 5 at 31%, and District 5 is a majority minority at 54%. The submitter mentioned that it was a modification of Draft A. However, because there were so many changes that didn't resemble Draft A, we went ahead and numbered it Public 101. And this might be your first opportunity to see that Public 101, because it was just, I just did receive it this afternoon. Next slide. Shown for, I know that the depiction is small here, but just shown so that you can compare some of the outlines of the 4 maps presented for you, available for you. Thank you. And then the next slide. Also, comparing the citizen voting age populations and the total population deviations for you. Next slide. The law requires we keep the same election year sequencing. So districts 1, 3, and 5 will be up in 2022, and districts 2 and 4 will be up in 2024. However, the law does allow the council to switch around the numbering. It would be kind of unusual to switch it out much if your map is very similar to the existing. So we avoid voter deferrals, meaning those who might be switched from a 2022 to a 2024 year, and also to avoid voter confusion, but do know that that is your prerogative to switch around the numberings as long as you keep the same district numbers up in the same year. Next slide, please. So that concludes my formal presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions now or after the public hearing. And again, the goal tonight would be hopefully to identify 1 to 2 focus maps so that the public can do just that, just focus in on those maps and provide input to just a few maps as opposed to several maps. And if the council wants to adjust those numbering, now would be the time to make that recommendation as well, although you will have another opportunity at your next hearing. The council can request any variations to the focus maps, but I do need to remind you that we are restricted to the geography of the census block. So it gets a little tricky, especially in Temecula. We have some really odd-shaped census block geographies that we must follow. So that's why some of the lines may look a little strange to some of you. Again, all of the maps can be viewed on the city's website, as well as an interactive review map viewer that is available at the website that allows you to actually type in your address, see where you are, and also to overlay different maps. You can overlay the boundary of the existing and then have an underlying map that shows whichever map you'd like to see. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions either now or after the public hearing.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, let's go ahead and start and see if the council have any questions to begin with. Not seeing any, then let's go ahead and open a public hearing. Do we have any public comment?
We do have public comments, Mr. Mayor. We actually just have 2 emailed public comments and no in-person comments on this particular item. We'll go ahead and, at this point, read those public comments. And because it is a public hearing, actually, if we can go ahead and have the video to read the rules of the public hearing, because we do have 2 public comments. Jonathan? Any person may submit written comments to the City Council before a public hearing or may appear and be heard in support of or in opposition to the approval of the projects at the time of the hearing. If you challenge any of the projects in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the city clerk at or prior to the public hearing. For all public hearings, each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting by submitting a speaker card to the city clerk or by submitting an email to be read aloud into the record at the meeting. Email comments must be submitted to councilcomments@temeculaca.gov. Email comments on all matters, including those not on the agenda, must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comments. At public hearings involving land use matters, the property owner or the applicant property owner has the burden of proof and therefore shall be allowed 15 minutes for an initial presentation and an additional 10 minutes for rebuttal by its development team following other comments on the matter. The mayor may allow more time if required to provide due process for the property owner or applicant. An appellant, other than the property owner or applicant, and the spokesperson for an organized group of residents residing within the noticed area of the property, which is the subject of the public hearing, shall be allowed 15 minutes to present the appellant's position to the council. The mayor may allow more time, if required, to provide due process for the appellant. All other members of the public may speak during the public hearing for a maximum period of 5 minutes each. Deferral of one speaker's time to another is not permitted. In the event there is a large number of speakers, the mayor may reduce the maximum time limit for members of the public to speak. All public participation is governed by the council policy regarding public participation at meetings adopted by resolution number 2021-54. Thank you, Jonathan. And the 2 public comments are from Martha Howard and Ira Robinson. It'll be Martha Howard first. I find it important to provide a background for my comments as follows. Although the council approved on September 28, 2021 to meet for a redistricting workshop with the Ready Commission, the council and community members, the city retracted from its promise stating that minimal community participation was not worth the consultant's fees, adding also the present in-person health concerns. We certainly don't dispute the in-person meeting. However, we could have had a Zoom meeting, but the city clerk, following administrative advice, did not provide such an option. Let me further elaborate by mentioning that since 2017, we had acted and participated in good faith and reason, requesting the previous and present council to include community involvement beyond public comments. When the city overlooks our past 5 years of engaging as minimal participation, it oversimplifies our efforts and the communities of interest we represent. Unfortunately, faith and reasons were betrayed by your abuse of legislative power. Therefore, even with all the obstacles the city placed on us, we submitted to the demographer and council members a modified map from the city's Draft A. We created this map with the technical collaboration from MALDEF, Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. This map meets the CVAP, California voting age population of 50% plus for District 5 and potentially before next redistricting for District 1 and 3 that a majority minority would elect a member of their choice within their community. This map meets population contiguous and preserves communities of interest such as Latino population who share socioeconomic and cultural commonalities. For example, District 5 has the largest Latino population and the largest multi-dwelling residents. In addition, the residents are the working force who elevate our tourism industry, providing customer, food, and entertainment services. It only makes sense to adopt Draft A modified map we are presenting to you tonight. Thank you. And as our consultant mentioned, that is now Public 101 map. The next speaker and final speaker is Ira Robinson. Once again, this is a plea for meaningful and substantial public involvement in Temecula's current redistricting process. As I understand it, the law requiring certain local governing bodies to change from at-large to by-district elections was enacted primarily to make it easier for citizens who are members of a protected class to elect candidates of their choice. Under the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, a protected class includes citizens of any race or color and members of any language minority group. A language minority group includes persons who are American Indian, Asian American, Alaskan Natives, or of Spanish heritage. Given the primary intent of the law, a number of Temecula residents and I have been continuously pushing the city to permit the full involvement of protected class members and the general public with the city's hired demographer and city staff in the redistricting process. How does it make sense to exclude the primary intended beneficiaries of the law from the process? In 2017, the city, in response to what it claimed to be an imminent threat of costly litigation, decided to make the required change from at-large elections to elections by district. Despite our request that the city encourage and permit full public involvement in the line drawing process, the public was limited to choosing between 3 maps prepared by a city-hired demographer who essentially worked free of public involvement or oversight. On September 28, 2021, the council held its second of 4 scheduled public hearings concerned with redistricting. The third hearing was scheduled for today, January 25, 2022. A 4th public hearing is scheduled for March 8th, with adoption of the final map by April 17th being the hope. Following comments from then Mayor Edwards, members of council, the city manager and city attorney, and then chair of the Ready Commission and the demographer, the city clerk summed up the discussion as follows. We'll go ahead and move forward with the general direction from the council to do a public workshop of sorts with the Ready Commission as well as the demographer over the next few months. And we'll try to schedule that prior to the January hearing. Following the September 28th meeting, not a word was said by the city to the public or to us about the agreed-upon public workshop or a proposed date, time, and place for such a session. Then on January 18th, 2022, the city clerk forwarded an email message to Ms. Howard and me, which said, among other things, unfortunately, due to the ongoing COVID concerns, the lack of availability of the consultants for additional in-person gatherings, and the limited expressed interest by the community, we will not be able to hold an additional workshop between now and the conclusion of our redistricting process. In other words, during the 112 days that followed the September 28th hearing, absolutely nothing was said or done to make the agreed-upon workshop happen. The good news in all of this is that over the 82 days remaining between now and April 17th, there should be time for the city to do what was decided upon over 4 months ago. It is respectfully recommended and requested that the council use the time remaining between now and then to right the ship and give the people a chance. COVID will soon be a memory, but the new districts will be with us for the next 10 years. Let's get it right this time. Thank you for allowing me to present these comments. P.S. If there is time for additional comments, I'd like to say the city did a much better job with its 2016 promotion of Measure S, a voter-approved sales tax measure that delivers to the city an additional revenue windfall of well in excess of $20 million a year. In connection with the city clerk's mention of little expressed interest by the community, the question is, without any announcement, date, time, or place for a public workshop, what could we have done to promote it? And in connection with the meetings reportedly held at each of the 5 board or commission meetings, it should be noted that those meetings were reported at the September 28th meeting. Mr. Mayor, that concludes the comments, and I have no in-person comments.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and see council discussion here. We have some action items that they're looking for us tonight. Yes. They are. They're looking for us to narrow down, I think, first to a couple of maps in that conversation. Mike, did I catch that correctly?
So,
you could pull that slide back
so
up,
while
maybe?
we're not making any decisions tonight, we did hear from our consultant, if you would like to narrow the focus of the 4 maps that are before you to a view of, less than that, we can certainly entertain that, but you are not making any final adoption decisions.
And real quick, I just
Go ahead.
I wanted to comment on the speaker's submitted comments. I think I was kind of surprised, frankly, by the comments to say that we betrayed promise and public trust in this process. I mean, we've had a variety of public meetings; they're all noticed, and then we went as far as to develop the Ready Commission with the very explicit intent when that was developed that it would serve as that additional public input from the community for redistricting. And that's exactly what they did. And in fact, when we were reappointing and having conversations last year, we reemphasized that was one of the major tasks that we expected that commission to participate in. And so, not only have we had, 4 public hearings at this point, along with an additional 5 across, did we do Old Town Local Review Board as well?
I'd have to go back and check, but I know for sure we did. This is the 3rd of the 4 required public hearings. Plus, we went to all the commissions. I'm not sure. We might have had Old Town Local Review Board scheduled, but they're
Right.
Because they meet infrequently. And then we did send out the city newsletter mailer to all 41,000 residents. So they definitely got notice there. We've done multiple social media posts, and we've done multiple public hearing notices in print media.
Well, and I think all in all, I mean, it goes beyond the minimum requirements of the law, right? And I think that's the important part of this conversation, is that there is a minimum standard, and we chose to go beyond that. And we chose to have commissions specifically address, and one commission formed specifically to address these concerns that were brought up the first time we did this years ago. So this is exactly how the process was supposed to proceed as far as I'm concerned, and it exceeded the expectations of even the state mandate, which created this whole process in the first place. So I'm glad to see that, despite all of that, our commenters were at least able to provide, their own recommended maps and things and participate in the process, recognizing that despite some of the challenges we've seen over the last months, we've still been able to host a fairly robust conversation on that. The conversation is far from over. We're going to talk a little bit more about it tonight. But I got to say, I was a little disappointed with those comments, because I think we really have done as robust a job and even beyond what's required to meet these expectations. So, and certainly any overtures that were made that were, attempting to limit public comments or anything like that, that is absolutely not the case. That's literally why we are here tonight, is to have this conversation and to have yet another public hearing on exactly this topic. So it was disappointing to hear that, but beyond that, let's start that conversation here tonight. And I know Mary Ann, you had some comments to start with.
I do. I'm having a little bit of trouble with these maps because they don't include some of our main arterials, like Margarita and De Portola all the way through, and Inez and Meadows Parkway. So it's kind of hard to tell what's what on here. Is there for future discussion, can we have more details on streets so we can tell what we're looking at?
Sure. And I'd also recommend you go on the website, because on the website you can zoom in. It's a little hard on the scale, of
Yeah.
8.5 by 11 to give enough detail and street names and all that. So, but on the website, it's a really easy to use interactive map. So if you do have questions, this is for the public as well. If you do have questions about that, just go to the website. And the nicest features too are that you're able to overlay what we currently have to the 3 proposed maps that are out there, and obviously create your own map as well. So it's a pretty robust tool, I think. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think we have a bit of limitation on the visibility there. Yeah, Stu.
Have just one comment. As far as I'm concerned, draft C is a non-starter because it really takes out that majority-minority. So there would be no majority-minority district. So as far as I'm concerned, C is off the table, in my opinion, but.
Fair enough. Can we pull up the 3 or 4 maps there, just so, yeah, thank you. All right, so you're saying map C is, yeah, I would agree. I think that one creates, it's very different than what we currently have, especially in the District 2. And then I agree, it definitely changes a lot of the dynamics in in the population numbers. So I would agree that draft C probably isn't a good option. I would add, I think that draft A isn't a very good option either. And just from my perspective in the community that I represent in District 1, it takes, if you look at the circle, I know you can't see it in detail, but the circle in Red Hawk, and it basically takes the circle in Red Hawk, which is already split in half, which is, in my mind, problematic because that is, within that circle, one distinct, discrete community of like, right? But it takes that and splits it in half. But in this case, draft A takes that and basically splits it down Tiburcio there, and it's only the streets on the one side that are included. I mean, it's kind of a, so it sort of disenfranchises that circle within Red Hawk even further. So that I'm kind of disappointed with, which kind of leaves us with draft B in my opinion. I appreciate the effort on public map number 101 there, but again, that significantly different from what the current districts look like, which isn't too problematic, but I think there's some consistency, and that's one of those tenets, at least within the state regulations there, is to not create too much of an overturn of community either. So I find that to be a little bit problematic as well. Zach?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's kind of difficult now because you throw out 3 kind of maps and you're left with 1, and I don't really want to make, I'm certainly not going to make a decision now. So personally for me, the only one that really is problematic, just on first glance and digging into the numbers, is draft C. Haven't had enough time to look at the data on the Public 101, obviously just getting it. So I feel comfortable the time that I spent with A, B, and C to sort of narrow it down between A, B, and then I just would certainly want more time with Public 101 to just vet it. But those are just my initial thoughts without, really making a decision right now.
Okay. Ms. Alexander?
As for me, just picking 2, again, A and B, just dig more into those 2. Again, they're more consistent. There's a less change in the districts in itself, and just seems to make a little bit more sense. So I think a little bit more time in those 2 drafts would be best.
All right. Are we rolling into maybe a consensus on a focus for A and B then across the council?
Yes, I think, map B is probably the least, it shows the least amount of change, and it doesn't seem to split neighborhoods as far as I can tell. I'm going to check the website and see, but it looks fairly consistent. And I'm looking at A. Yes, I would say that, A and B.
Mr. Schwenk?
Yeah, I just want to add something. So just to be clear for the public, adding a focus to these maps isn't taking any one map off of the possibility for adoption. Is that a true statement?
That's correct, and everything will remain on the website and in the interactive review map, so all the maps will still be up. This just gives the public an idea of where the direction to focus their comments.
Okay, I really want everyone to know that we're not making a decision right at this second. And then again, thank you for the time on these maps and the presentation tonight. Much appreciated.
All right, were there any other items you wanted us to comment on? I'm sorry.
I have my direction.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't think we need a motion or anything. I think we just, we've done what we can for this item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you for facilitating the 3rd public hearing, and I definitely want to thank Shalise Tilton for being here in person to go ahead and help us work through and focus in on the 2 maps for public comments. Again, the website is up and we're ready to receive comments.
Great, thank you. And thank you for being here. I know you're busy this time of year, so appreciate you coming to Temecula for us. All right, so going back onto the beginning of the agenda, we will jump back to presentations. First presentation is by Connie, is it Stouffer? All right, from Economic Development Coalition Executive Director. Good evening.
Good evening. I just have some handouts. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here this evening. My name is Connie Stouffer. I am the Executive Director of the Economic Development Coalition. I am new in that role. I just started around Thanksgiving, and so I've been very busy these last 2 months getting to know the organization and the region. Also new to California, just moved here from Idaho. Just trying to change that traffic around and start having people move back this way. But I'm here tonight to tell you a little bit about what we're working on, the vision for the EDC, and what we'll be working on over the course of the next year. To start on my presentation, I'll just be giving you some background on myself and my experience in economic development. I have a master's degree in public administration with a focus in state and local government and nonprofits. I have my certification from the International Economic Development Council and a nonprofit leadership certificate from the Harvard Kennedy School of Executive Education. Here's a quick overview of some of the projects I've worked on in the past, and the purpose of highlighting these projects is to show the spectrum of projects I've worked on. So BC Fisheries is one that I worked on when I worked on the Oregon coast. It's a small family-owned business that was shipping internationally, but wanted to vertically integrate and build a processing facility. So we worked with them to get new market tax credits brought in, worked with the port there to bring in some federal dollars to shore up the port and the facilities there. And that was a really exciting project for Brookings, which is the last city on the coast of Oregon before you get into California. 32 jobs at that project. Brookings is a small community and hadn't seen much investment in several years, and so we were excited about bringing those family wage jobs there. Chobani is located in southern Idaho, where I just moved from. Twin Falls is the home of the world's largest yogurt processing facility there. It's over 1 million square feet, and I helped work on their expansion of their R&D facility there. We were excited about that project because Chobani started in New York. They have a facility there still, and so we were excited about making sure that that R&D facility was in Idaho and our communities there. Artisan Labs was one of the last projects I worked on in Idaho. It's in a very small community of Hanson. Hanson has about 1,500 people. Artisan Labs is a cosmetics manufacturer, going to be bringing 50 jobs to Hanson. 50 jobs in a community of 1,500, it's like 500 jobs. And they had seen no sizable investment in that community in a really long time, and it was going to be biochemists and engineer jobs, and so very excited about that. And then Himpotexture was also, that one was an announcement, I think 2 days before I announced I was coming to California. But that was an exciting project because Idaho was the last state in the nation to legalize industrial hemp. And so we worked really closely with our legislature to make sure that that was passed, because we were in the process of recruiting this company. And we wanted to make sure that we could land them. And so a variety of projects and variety of communities, variety of industries, and I'm excited to bring that experience here. Also have some experience working internationally. These are some pictures from trade missions to Japan that I was able to attend, working both on helping get products that were being produced in my communities to Japan, but also trying to get Japanese companies interested in locating and doing more export business to Oregon at the time. And here's some opportunities that I've had. 2 gold awards from the International Economic Development Council. Those were for marketing efforts that we were able to put together. The most recent one that we were awarded in 2020 was for our virtual FAM tours that we put on. FAM tours are familiarization tours where we bring site selectors to the community to tour them around. And in 2020, we obviously couldn't do that for obvious reasons, and so we switched to a virtual format. We didn't know it at the time, but we were the very first economic development agency in the country to do a virtual FAM tour, and we ended up being the best. And so I was really excited about our ability to pivot and do that, and then also have opportunities to highlight our region and our organization on the international level. Now that I'm here, I'm excited to start focusing on what we need to do here for the EDC and for our region in these first few months. And this is highlighted in the packets that you have there for my work plan. But really working on reaching out to the community to find out what is important to you as a city, what your goals are for economic development, marketing the region, and that will include both traditional marketing on our website and social media, but also some of those FAM tours and bringing folks here. And we'll be hosting our first planning tour for our FAM tour this Thursday, so we're excited about getting the ball rolling on that. Expanding capacity, right now we are a team of 1 and an intern, which I want to thank the city for your support of that intern that we have at the EDC. We want to expand our capacity so we can do more. Bringing FAM tours, some data resources, and strategic targeting for the region so that we're really thinking about who would be the best fit for our region, who's going to be successful and want to move to this region to expand their business. And then part of what I want to promise is my deliverables, is to have an ROI for you at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, my goal is to say for every dollar that was invested in the organization, this is what we were able to create in new capital expenditures and in new payroll. That is very hard to do the first year because projects, have a long lead time. That is my goal to you so that you know what value you're getting from the city for your investment in the organization and economic development. And with that, I'm open to any questions. My contact information is right there if you would love to chat with you on an individual level to find out what your goals are for the city and in economic development.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction as well. I really appreciate getting to know you a little bit better. Looks like you're a great fit to the region.
Thank you.
Look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, and our second presentation this evening is Mr. Rob Grantham, Rancho, California Water District General Manager. All right, good afternoon and welcome.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to see you. Last time I was here, I think was in September, and as committed at that time, want to come back and give regular updates to the Council, particularly now with the drought conditions, and it rained in December, so also just being able to give a little bit of clarity. Before I begin, if I may, our board president, President Gonzalez Brady, is here tonight, and also my colleague Jason Martin, who is our Director of Administration. And Jason, if you don't mind coming up, he's going to talk about some of the ongoing events that we have. Well, if we look outside, it was very wet December, and so we're still hearing news about droughts. And so it's part of that clarity that we're trying to provide to the community. We are in a long-term drought situation. If we look at California, we fit into a larger watershed, if you will. California, Southern California, Nevada, and Arizona. And so we're really looking at a multi-year drought. And so those are the considerations that we're thinking about internally and also communicating to our customers. On January 4th of this year, the State Water Resources Control Board passed what they refer to as Emergency Drought Water Use Ordinance or regulation. And so we're not in mandatory restrictions, but we are at a request to reduce water. And our community, as I noted back in September, has really answered that call year over year. And for that, we're very grateful. It's a partnership, and that's the way we look at it. With that, let me turn it over to Jason to talk a little bit about the district and what we're doing now, and then I'll end with what we're doing on outreach, because I know that's important to the council.
Well, thanks, Rob. Good evening, Mayor Rom, council members. Appreciate the time today to talk a little bit about what we're doing as a district. Let me move forward. So as Rob mentioned, the state enacted mandatory regulations on January 4th. Those included things like making sure that residents aren't hosing down hardscape, that they're not irrigating after a rain event, and that they're not using hoses without a shutoff valve to wash their cars. So those are all items that have been in our water shortage contingency plan as voluntary actions. So what we've recently done, or what our board has done, is they've moved into stage 3B of our water shortage contingency plan. And so what that does is it takes those voluntary restrictions and moves them to mandatory. The good news is these have always been best practices. These have been things that the state and the district have asked our customers to do for a long time. So really no change there other than just a reminder that we want you to continue to do these practices. Additionally, what we've also done is we've taken some of our variances that we offer our customers, or our financial breaks, I guess you would call them, for some of the things that we offer, and those have been suspended. And so for things like bill reductions for pool refills, we've also got expanding landscape for an additional budget. We've suspended those. And then when the customer identifies a leak, or if we send them a leak notification that says you have a leak, if they don't repair that within 48 hours, then we wouldn't reduce their bill. Now again, that's a subjective amount of time. Let's say we notify them on Monday, they can't get to it until the next weekend. That's fine. Happy to work with them. We're not going to be that punitive on those kinds of things. And then lastly, I think probably what has the biggest impact to our customers is the potential to go into higher tiers, because we are reducing the budgets in some of our tiers. And so for residential, for multifamily, and for landscape customers, they have 4 tiers to their water budget. Tiers 1 and 2, what we consider their efficient indoor and outdoor water budget, gives them enough water for all of their indoor and outdoor needs. Well, tier 3 is when they fall into their inefficient tier. And what stage 3B does is it reduces that tier 3 by 50%. The good news is most of our customers stay within their efficient budget, not a lot of impact here. And as Rob will tell you in a few minutes, we're going to do a lot of outreach to our customers to let them know there are plenty of ways, plenty of things we can offer so that you don't go into those higher tiers. And then for our commercial and agricultural customers, they have a 3-tier system. For them, their inefficient tier is tier 2, and so that's the tier that will be reduced by 50%. And then, as I mentioned, what we really want to do is work with our customers to make sure that they have the tools and the resources to be as efficient as possible. And that comes in the way of financial incentives and rebates and different things that we have available for customers to become more efficient. For our residential customers, for example, that includes things like rebates on on weather-based irrigation controllers, and also turf replacement. Metropolitan Water District right now is offering $2 a square foot for up to 5,000 square feet of turf replacement. And I know Councilman Stewart is very interested in that one. And then for our agricultural customers, we have similar programs for high-efficiency nozzles, for pressure regulation, and probably one of our more successful programs we've had in the last couple of years is crop swap. And this is where we incentivize financially customers to convert from a higher water use crop to a lower water use crop. And I'm very proud to say that as of this last month, we've awarded $2 million to agricultural customers to convert these crops to lower water use crops. We still have $2 million more left, so send those customers our way, and we would be happy to help them out. We have some websites listed up on the screen right now. That's where customers can go to get more information about these different programs. We'll also leave some cards at the back of the room that have these same links and a QR code to take you to our website to get more information. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Just in closing, is important to the council and the community. We are out there to communicate. We are going to be having a series of workshops throughout February and into March, so the public really understands what we're doing. I also want to acknowledge and thank you to Councilmember Stewart and to the city manager and his team for the partnership. We had a great meeting this morning, but one thing that I always think is important to acknowledge is that relationship that we have, and Eastern has as well with the city. It was quite fun. When Jason and I went back to the office, we had a meeting with Abbott Vascular, another jewel of the community. They're going after an international award for water efficiency, and it's very rare. It's quite an achievement. They're working directly with Aaron's team and with the district, looking for opportunities. So they're actually investing in Temecula, in the parks, et cetera, to try to capture this water savings. Because when we look at water demands, we're looking in aggregate. So if we get a public-private partnership like that where we can reduce overall, it's a win-win for the community, and those are the fun ones to highlight. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
You have any questions? All right. Well, thank you for coming out. Your partnership is very important to us, and appreciate all the updates. Appreciate the work you guys did on the Temecula Parkway and all that too. It's nice to see that all done there. But appreciate all you do for our community.
Well, thank you for the time. Have a great evening.
Thank you. All right, so this evening we only have a board commission report from Mr. Watts with the Planning Commission, I understand. Not only, I should say, excitingly, we get a report from our Planning Commissioner, Mr. Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, city staff, and members of the public. Good evening. Normally, my goal is always to make these presentations as brief as possible. Tonight, it's going to be a little longer for a specific reason. But at the top, we have included all of our planning commissioners, and their names are underneath the pictures. And I would like to actually read the description of the Planning Commission, because a lot of people think, and they have a good idea what the Planning Commission does, but if you ask them to explain it in a legal term or in details, it's hard. So this is a great opportunity to share with the public and with you all exactly what the Planning Commission is charged with doing. And I'll just read it. The Planning Commission, serving as a designated statutory planning agency for the city of Temecula, reviews and makes recommendations on topics related to subdivisions, specific plans, zone changes, plot plans, and conducts legally required public hearings. So that's what we are charged with, and that's what we do. So I'm glad we have a chance to actually share that with everyone in the room and everyone else watching. Next slide, please. Our last meeting was January 19th, and we received a report on the housing element, the 2021-2029 housing element update. This is the second time around, and it was passed with a 3-to-1 vote. And next slide, I think that's it. We did recommend that the council hear the housing element, and pass the second revision. No guarantees that we're not going to go 3 or 4 or 5 times. I don't know. That's just a guess, a personal opinion. So, any questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, and can we have a public safety report from Chief Crater? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. I wanted to kind of do something a little different. Usually I just give you the monthly report, but for this report I want to give you all of 2021 and what the fire department here in Temecula has been doing. We have been busy. We're the second busiest city in Riverside County for calls for service. So, slide please. You have it in front of you. There you go. Thank you. So, City of Temecula Fire Department, we ran 9,760 calls in the city limits. Obviously, we run into the county and we run more. So, I want to kind of explain how the division that I run works. It consists of Duluth, La Cresta, French Valley, parts of Winchester, Glen Oaks, Owanga, and all the way to the San Diego county line. So these are just calls that we ran in the city, but in the division we ran over 15,500 calls. So our firefighters have definitely been busy, and then with COVID on top of that, it's been a very impressive 2021 for the fire department. So in the city we ran a total of 171 fires, 22 of those being house fires, 21 hazardous materials. We do contract with the county, CAL FIRE. Those responses for hazmat come out of our hazmat station in Winchester, and they're able to mitigate and handle those situations for the city. We had a total of 7,217 medical responses in the city with an average time of 4.3 seconds, or 4.3 minutes. Seconds would be fast. So our response times are right on board where we need to be and what we need to be at as a city of our size. And with the 4.0 staffing that we have, it definitely makes a difference for people suffering from cardiac arrest. Our save rate is well above the average of anybody else in the county. So, you know, that staffing definitely makes a difference for life-saving. You know, when people are having a cardiac event, we have the staff to be able to resuscitate them and also save property and reduce damage on any kind of structure fires that we have or incidents in the city. So we definitely appreciate the support with Measure S and the public supporting the fire department in that effort for the 4-person staff in the city of Temecula. We also ran 819 traffic collisions, and the thing about that, the freeway and how the roads are in Temecula, they're definitely safe. But we appreciate the fact that we have all the life safety tools at our truck station with the extrication equipment. As you can see, it's needed. We do on a lot of traffic collisions where we need to extricate people on the freeway especially. That's the total numbers from the fire department side, but something that is also very impressive is our fire prevention side and the numbers that we keep up with on our fire prevention, folks doing out new inspections for homes, commercial buildings, and just the new construction permits in the city and plan reviews. So you could see in December 433, but for the year 5,015 plan reviews in the city. Construction inspections for December 309. Construction inspections for the year 4,273. Annual inspections 376, 6,511 for the year. And then due to COVID, obviously, we went online and we've had less counter inquiries or people coming into City Hall. And for the yearly total there is 166. And we are on pace to probably outdo that number. We already have 150 new inspections in this week into our prevention bureau. So hats off to them. During COVID, we never shut down, just like the fire department. The city has to continue to run, so I also want to take my hat off to my staff in the fire marshal's office here in Temecula for doing a really fantastic job and pushing through to keep the city running and keep the business going here in the city of Temecula. You'll notice that my badge is shrouded. We lost a firefighter here for CAL FIRE Riverside County Fire Department, Jake Flores. Jacob Flores was a family man, a really good colleague, an excellent firefighter. He grew up in Temecula. He was a Golden Bear, graduated from here. His family loves the Temecula. He had 20 years with us here, protecting the citizens of Riverside County. Jacob, last fire station was Station 97 in the city of Lake Elsinore. I worked there 17 years before I came to Temecula. He'll be sorely missed by us. I'd like to have a moment of silence for him, and please hold his family, friends, and colleagues in your thoughts and prayers in the coming weeks as we lay Jacob to rest. Rest in peace, Jacob. We'll take it from here, brother. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have one comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief, we know that businesses and families all over the United States have been impacted. That's no different for the city, and it's no different for CAL FIRE. So we know that CAL FIRE has been particularly impacted by COVID, and still you're maintaining an excellent level of service for us. And I noticed 4 seconds is a pretty fast call.
Some are.
4 minutes is a very fast call also. So just let your teams know that we're thinking of them and we're praying for CAL FIRE so that everybody gets back on station and back to work, for doing the great job that you always do.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to public comments, non-agenda items. Do we have any public comments this evening?
Yes, we have one in-person public comment on non-agendized items from Bob Cowell. So Jonathan, if you can run the video. A total of 30 minutes is provided for members of the public to address the City Council on matters not listed on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting by submitting a speaker card to the city clerk or by submitting an email to be read aloud into the record of the meeting. Email comments must be submitted to councilcomments@temeculaca.gov. Speaker cards for in-person comments will be called in the order received by the city clerk, and then, if time remains, email comments will be read. Email comments on all matters must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comment. All public participation is governed by council policy regarding public participation at meetings adopted by resolution number 2021-54.
Good evening, Mr. Cowell.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and council. Did you get that? Did I get a copy of that? I gave it to
Yes, we have materials for distribution from you and others that we distribute after the meeting.
Okay. What it is a measured initiative that provides that local land use and zoning laws override conflicting state laws. It's an initiative constitutional amendment. It just came out. Interesting enough, it came up by one of the an age group, one of the biggest age groups in the country, and it's going big in Orange County where it started. Stanton and Buena Park have signed on to it already. But last Tuesday night in this very hall, I listened to comments to item 13, which is regarding state building mandates. These mandates require local cities to accommodate urban sprawl in cities like Temecula. I listened to two members of the council talk about how active they were in Sacramento and what great relations they have made over the years. These two members, Mayor, later voted themselves onto a committee to stop these urban sprawl mandates. Maybe these two council members are spending too much time in Sacramento and D.C. It sounded like it, and they have become part of the deep bureaucratic state. If they have been working on this for years, why would we, the people, trust them to solve the problem? Besides that, Sacramento does not listen to anyone. They have too many special interests. Nobody in Sacramento cares whether you pass a resolution or not, but nobody cares if you go to Sacramento to stop them from dictating our lives either. Don't go to Sacramento asking for nothing. Demand that we have our property rights. Don't be nice. They're not nice to us. I know that some of the council doesn't think resolutions do anything. Resolutions of support are endorsements, and endorsements matter. An endorsement from the sheriff to a candidate running for office is an important thing. People think that candidate is something special. So stop state government from usurping local control and endorse this initiative next time or when you read it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any further?
No, that concludes public comments.
All right. Okay, let's move on to city council reports. Who wants to go first? Mr. Schwank.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to give a little project update on the new mini pump track over at Long Canyon Creek Park. And mini is, maybe doesn't do it full justice. It's not your typical, like the mini one over at Ronald Reagan. It's just a smaller footprint. So the berms and the heights of everything are still full size. This is over next to Day Middle School at Long Canyon Creek Park. Construction is ahead of schedule, which is super exciting. And you can see the grand opening ribbon cutting will be later in February. And then to spread out the love, which we're trying to do, this is on the north end, obviously. There's a third one at Wolf Creek Park coming soon. So we're really excited. Not only with this mini pump track as an addition to that park, that park, we did modify General Kearney there to facilitate an easier drop off and pick up there at Day Middle School, adding street parking and some restriping. So that's coming along well as well. That is all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Miss Alexander.
So just a quick update. I just want to, not update, but I just want to say thank you so much to the police department out here in Temecula. There was an incident actually that I almost got involved in with a weapon, and the response time from our sheriff's department was incredible. And I was able to connect directly with Chief. And I just want to say thank you to them because they do such an incredible job. I had four vehicles show up within less than 4 minutes. So I just want to say thank you, and my family and everybody else. So thank you very much. That's it.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to the consent calendar. If we can play that video, please.
All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine, and all will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the City Council request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. A total of 30 minutes is provided for members of the public to address the City Council on items that appear on the consent calendar. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting by submitting a speaker card to the city clerk or by submitting an email to be read aloud into the record at the meeting. Email comments must be submitted to councilcomments@temeculaca.gov. Speaker cards for in-person comments will be called in the order received by the city clerk, and then, if time remains, email comments will be read. Email comments on all matters must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comments. All public participation is governed by council policy regarding public participation at meetings adopted by resolution number 2021-54.
All right, thank you. Okay, so item number 1, waive reading of standard ordinances and resolutions. Item number 2, approve action minutes of January 18, 2022. 3, approve list of demands. 4, authorize the submittal of an application to the Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery, or CalRecycle, for funding from the SB 1383 Local Assistance Grant Program. Number 5, approve purchase and sale agreement for acquisition of certain properties, interests, and loss of ground lease rent and interests for billboard on assessors, parcel numbers 910-020-077, 910-060-002, 910-060-003, 009, and 015, in connection with the I-15 French Valley Parkway improvements, Phase 2, PW 16-01. Item number 6, approve First Amendment and restated term sheet with United States Department of Transportation for the I-15 French Valley Parkway improvements, Phase 2, PW 16-01. Item 7, accept improvements and file notice of completion for pavement rehabilitation program citywide West Side Business Park Area PW 19-17. And finally, item 8, accept improvements and file notice of completion for ADA compliance for pavement rehab program West Side Business Park Area PW 20-08.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, a motion a second. Please cast your votes. And surprisingly, that passes 5-0. So we're going to go ahead and recess to Community Services District meeting.
All right, so I will begin in roll call, please. We're all here, so I guess that's not necessary.
So noted.
And any public comment?
We do not have any public comments.
All right, we'll move on to the consent calendar, which is item number 9, which is approve action minutes of January 18th, 2022.
Move approval.
All right, it's been moved and second. Please vote. All right, and that passes 5-0. Director's report. Any directors have a report?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, general manager's report?
Hi,
Oh, there we
sir.
are. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that, just took me a second.
right.
Yes, we have a director's report.
All right.
Just a couple slides here. The first thing I wanted to bring everyone's attention to is the aquatics hiring workshop. We have a second one coming up on February 2nd. This is a novel practice that our aquatics team came up with to address some of the hiring difficulties and shortages they were facing in staffing. This is a 1-hour-long Zoom workshop where kids 15 and older who might be interested in working for the aquatics department are encouraged to just tune in. They get to talk to current and former aquatics instructors and employees, ask them any questions they have, learn a little bit more about what the job entails, and their parents are encouraged to attend with them if they're interested. And they've had an almost 100% success hiring rate since they started implementing these hiring workshops. So great opportunity if you know any young people or older people who are looking for a job in aquatics. And it's just really a great way for the kids to learn a little bit more about what the job would entail. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to bring your attention to some of the events we're doing to celebrate American Black History Month. We have a lot of really, really wonderful events this year, including our second Saturday celebrating the Republic of Benin on February 12th, the student art mural, which was unveiled on Martin Luther King Day this past week or last week, the master dance class with hip lay ballerinas, which is a really just dynamic dance troupe that combines hip-hop dance with classical ballet. Fantastic. Great to see them. We've been trying to get them for a while now, so we're really excited to bring them in. And they do that master dance class on Saturday in the morning, and then in the evening you can come and see their performance. So with that, unless there are any questions, I'll be turning it over to our homeless outreach team to provide their update. Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. Myself, Mark Martinez, and Patrice Brown are joined by Brian Marshall with SWAG, and we're honored to give you a report on December homeless stats and also for the year of 2021. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mark, and he'll go over the stats for the time.
Thank you, Mike. Oh, next slide, please. The total number of clients stands at 142 for 2021. Street exits, we had 9 for the month of December, and our total is 85 for the year. There were 3 illegal encampments removed last month, and that stands at 80 plus for 2021. 2 clients were provided with financial assistance through CDBG funding. We were able to help 9 clients with financial assistance this year. Next slide, please. I'm going to pass it over to Patrice Brown for some of our team's success stories. Thank you.
Good evening. On Monday, December 6, homeless outreach staff provided transportation for 3 male transients to reunite with their families. Our hot team CSO Ponce helped transport 1 client to Indio, and the other 2 clients' destinations were Las Vegas and Oceanside. On Wednesday, December 15th, a longtime Temecula homeless couple came by the help center to speak with SWAG to seek help getting off the streets. The team has made regular contact with the couple over the past year, but they previously denied any help. SWAG was able to connect the female to the ARC facility in Riverside, where she is doing well. We are excited to see them finally working with SWAG, which further shows how important constant contact and relationship building is to our goals. On Tuesday, December 28th, a Temecula homeless male who suffers from alcoholism and is usually seen around Old Town Temecula was released from our local hospital due to a medical emergency. He arrived at the help center seeking treatment resources. SWAG was able to transport him to the ARC facility in Riverside for a 30-day stabilization program where after completion, client will transition into residential treatment. Now Mike will discuss some of the efforts we took in 2021 to address homelessness. And next slide.
Thank you. So here's a few bullet points. I'm not going to go through every one, but we're happy to answer any questions you have. But just some of the steps that we took over the past year, which is really our first full year, this team at least, working in homeless outreach. So we're happy with some of the successes, and we just wanted to point those out. So first and foremost, I think we have it at the top of the list is really going into an agreement with SWAG. This team has really just elevated what we're able to do, and we wouldn't have nearly as many successes without them. So I've said it many times, we're extremely grateful to Brian and his entire team. So other than that, I'll just go down a few of these. We've collaborated with Public Works, Code Enforcement, and Flood Control to permanently remove or secure various sites that were regular illegal encampments. So that way those sites are just not even available or options anymore. We've conducted an internal homeless census last year in lieu of the pit count that was canceled. Tomorrow was actually supposed to be the pit count for 2022, but that has been postponed to next month, so February 23rd will be that date. We worked with Project Touch, one of our great partners that operates the winter shelter. We had a lot of recommendations or some recommendations that we thought would better serve the clients with case management, things like that, and they've taken those recommendations and it's drastically decreased the number of people that actually stay at the winter shelter. And out of the, I believe it's 8 total that have stayed there over that time, we've had at most 5 over one night, but out of the 8 that have stayed there, we've been able to get 3 of them into housing or treatment. So we're pretty pleased with those successes, with those changes that Project Touch was able to do. And then the last one I'll touch on here is we began hosting monthly collaborative meetings with SWAG, the Hot Team, and some of our community partners, including CMOH and Project Touch, and we've had others throughout the year, and that allows us really to discuss specific clients that we're all working together. Obviously, we all have the same goal, and so for us to get together and discuss those clients and ideas that can maybe lead to more successes, it's been invaluable. So that concludes our report, and we're happy to answer any questions you all might have. Thank you.
Any questions? Yeah, no, great report. People are always asking, what is Temecula doing about homeless? And once, these reports come out, I blast them out on my social media. So, yeah, good job, guys. All right. Now, do we have a general manager's report?
Nothing tonight, Mr. President.
Okay. I do have one slide on the park opening, do I not? Yes. So if I could get that slide. So we're actually adding another sports park to the number of parks that we have in Temecula, which is already amazing. But this will be one that's going to be very valuable to programming, especially in the city of Temecula. So if you're around Saturday, February 12th, excuse me, come out to Summers Bend, which is that new subdivision that's off of Butterfield Stage. And we're going to do the grand opening of the sports ranch at Summers Bend Sports Park. And it's a great park. So if you get a chance, even if you don't come to this, drive out there and take a look at it, because it's a really, really nice addition to the parks here in the city of Temecula. So anyways, okay, director's report. Anybody got anything else? All right, then I will adjourn this meeting until the next one.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stewart. All right, so we're moving on to public hearing item number 12. Item number 12 is, we don't have to replay the...
We do not. We did it at the beginning.
Okay, good. Can I get a copy of all of those? Because I was thinking that when I have trouble sleeping, if we could just put them on the loop. Kidding, I'm sorry. Madam City Clerk, you're doing a wonderful job.
Mr. Mayor, Madam City Clerk, I think we need to go back to the SARTA consent item.
All right, that's my fault. SARTA. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the successor agency to the Temecula Redevelopment Agency to order. Do we have any public comments here?
We do not.
And I'm just going to note for the record that we are all still here, so no roll call needed. Do we, let's see, I guess item number 10 is just approve action minutes of the January 18, 2022.
Move approval.
Second.
And cast your votes. And that passes 5-0. Do we have an executive director's report this evening?
Nothing further tonight.
Any board of directors reports? No. All right, so now let's move on to item number 12. Mr. Peters, if you wouldn't mind joining us. It is the, oh boy.
Number 10. We skipped 11.
We skipped 11, so item number 12. Adopt ordinance amending Title 15 and Title 17 of Temecula Municipal Code pertaining to large family daycare homes. Second is to clarify standards that apply to senior housing, transitional housing, supportive housing, emergency shelters, trash enclosures, self-storage or mini warehouse facilities, and projects using the Affordable Housing Overlay Zone. And 3, establish standards and requirements for dedications and improvements for developments without a subdivision. Item number 4, update, and that should be how, not Hoas. There is no Hoas development impact fee.
Oh,
it is the update how development impact fees can be used. Item number 5, clarify where artificial turf could be installed. And 6, make minor typographical edits and finding the ordinance to be exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, pursuant to CEQA Guidelines 15061B3. Good afternoon, Mr. Peters.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. This is our annual code maintenance, and we're proposing changes to Title 15, which is building and construction, and Title 17, which is zoning. There are a number of changes in this package to both Title 15 and Title 17. I have a brief bullet point describing each. So the first is we're removing outdated secondary dwelling unit language and replacing it with accessory dwelling unit language to be current with state law. We're further clarifying the definition of ADUs or accessory dwelling units. Having worked with this for several months, there's some necessary updates and include changes to the definitions. We're consolidating family daycare language due to changes to state law. We're updating the land use matrix to allow for transitional and supportive housing in residential zones by right. This is required by state law and the city's housing element. We're updating ground-mounted solar collectors to be consistent with fire and building code setbacks, clarifying roof deck standards, providing development standard consistency for senior housing and congregate care facilities in public institutional zoning districts, clarifying floor area ratio and lot coverage requirements for self-storage and mini warehouse standards, updating regulations to provide robust standards for emergency shelters, updating trash enclosure standards to incorporate best practices in anti-dumping and trespass measures, clarifying the standards for affordable housing overlay or AHO zoning on PI or public institutional zoning. And we're reaffirming that artificial turf is not a landscape material for commercial areas, but there are allowances. They are permitted for sports and recreational areas, and then single-family residences may continue to use artificial turf per HOA rules. And I'll quickly introduce Ron Moreno to talk about the Title 15 changes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. So the Title 15 changes here refer to the establishment of standards and requirements for dedications and improvements in connection with the development of land in which no subdivision is involved. So applicants who propose new development within the city shall provide a means of providing the necessary right-of-way, whether it's for a street, trail, bicycle path, in times when a map is not otherwise required. So therefore, this will allow the city engineer at his discretion to be able to ask for said right-of-way improvements, right-of-way dedications, as well as improvements as well. Applicants shall construct improvements to city standards as applicable. However, now instead of a map being referred to in this title, it will be referred to as a land use entitlement. And rather than a subdivider, the change is made to an applicant. They are required to guarantee construction of said improvements, and the city engineer is authorized to execute these agreements on behalf of the city. Now, there are a couple of caveats. There are deferrals of public improvements that are going to be added to this chapter. Any required frontage improvements may be deferred when deemed appropriate by the city engineer when impractical due to physical constraints. So that will be one caveat. However, this agreement to defer improvements will be approved by the city attorney, and then this will follow the land to be noticed with successors to the title of real property, and a lien in the amount to reimburse the city for said improvements would also be attached to said land. Lastly, there is an exemption for these improvements so that it is not an undue burden onto certain land use entitlements. Some of those exemptions are an increase in square footage of 25% of an existing dwelling. So if you're under 25%, you would not be required to do so, as well as an ADU up to 1,200 square feet. That would also be exempt from any type of dedications or public improvements. And then lastly, the development of a non-habitable accessory structure also would not be deemed appropriate for having these types of improvements put upon them. However, no exemption from the requirement to construct these improvements shall be granted if the city engineer deems that it is for the public health, safety, and welfare for the citizens of Temecula. So those are the items that will be changing in Chapter 15.
In conclusion, the proposed project is exempt from CEQA under Section 15061B3. In staff's recommendation, the ordinance updates were presented to both the Planning Commission and City Council subcommittees, and the Planning Commission recommended approval on December 1st, 2021, vote of 3-0, and staff recommends the City Council approve the ordinance updates. And that concludes my presentation. Both Ron and myself are happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Have any questions? No? Okay. Well, let me get point of clarification here. Do we have to read this into the record then?
I have to read the title.
Okay,
And for the record, there are no public comments
no
on this.
public, thank you.
Yeah, you have to open the public hearing and
All right, let's go ahead and close the public hearing then, and I think I need a motion in a second.
Staff comments or no?
So what I understood, Mr. Mayor, is you opened the public hearing, I verified that there are no public comments, you then
Sure.
closed the public hearing, and now the city attorney will read the ordinance into.
yeah, except I think a council member had a comment.
Yes, is this at that point in time where I can do a public comment on, or public council comment on this?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I knew just questions, I wasn't
sure.
too sure if we
Sorry.
were transitioning. So there's just a concern of mine, and this is nothing new, and I think it's on a lot of people's minds. Great work on, who put this together. Obviously, again, state pushing down on us. But the concern of the transitional housing and the support housing to be able to go into single-family home areas is a big concern. For several reasons, why I'm not 100% supportive of it. I know there's a concern, but again, for safety for our community, I think we should have more control as to where those houses go. A lot of children, families, and a lot of these individuals are still trying to learn how to live within society. That's why they have the transitional housing. So just for me, it's very hard to sit here and say that it's going to be something that I can approve of to put in individuals who are still coming off the streets, who are still trying to figure out how to live as we do. And again, there is a place for them. You guys know I'm very supportive of SWAG and the HOT team, and if anything, there is a big place in my heart. But again, I think safety for our citizens is paramount. It's very, very important. So for me, just my understanding from staff is that they can just go in, take over a home, and then just end up putting in transitional housing. So we can have 10 men in a home who are just coming in Red Hawk or any other area, to my understanding. Is that correct or no?
Yeah, can we get some clarification on that?
Yeah, adding transitional and supportive housing to the land use matrix would allow it as a permitted use in residential zones.
Yes.
And that's per state law.
Absolutely. And that's a big concern of mine. So in any of our home areas where there are kids, they can just put homes wherever they would like to, and that's it. We have no say as far as the city council, and that's a big concern. Yes, ma'am.
So, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And if things have not changed, if they have 6 or more persons staying in the home, there's no accountability, there's no permit required or necessary. But if they go over 6 people, what happens, Matt?
And I may ask our city attorney for some backup on this, but the 6 or fewer used to apply to a number of different uses in residential zones, like family daycares or these types of housing. My understanding is the law doesn't differentiate the number exactly as to whether or not 6 or fewer is allowed and then 7 or more is a conditional use permit.
Because they're
It's just
considered,
permitted.
anybody living in the home is considered family. It doesn't distinguish between people who are related to each other or whether people come and go. They're just considered family, right? And that's part of the Fair Housing Act.
It's part of AB 316, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's also incorporated in our housing element
By
to be
necessity.
consistent with state law and based on HCD review.
So what recourse do we have? None? In that case, we have to try something else.
Yeah, the proposed amendments are to be consistent with state law, and so our housing element can get certified.
Well, I know that's a priority, so Peter, you want to jump in on this?
Mr. Peters is absolutely correct. It's a requirement of state law, and so the city's obligated to abide by it even if you don't agree with the state law. And so this ordinance is designed to implement that. And also, as Mr. Peters said, it is part of the city's housing element
By law.
by law.
By law. So perhaps if this happens in Temecula, then maybe we'd look at taking some kind of recourse then. I know there have been several cases where houses have been subject to code enforcement because of, hazardous conditions or overcrowded conditions, the way that, so I think if if we're forced to do this, as we know, we're being forced to do this, then we do have, after the fact, other means to ensure that neighborhood safety continues and that healthy conditions continue in the home.
Correct. It's allowed as a permitted use. There are occupancy rules and other regulations in the law that they have to follow. If they are not following that, then certainly code enforcement and the city can take other measures to make
So
sure
that
that
is an option.
they're following.
And we have actually used that option in the past to success.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Schwank?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the language says clarifying the standards. Do we currently have traditional housing or transitional housing or supportive housing in residential zones in Temecula right now?
We do not.
Okay,
We do not.
thank you.
So just to give you guys, I think you also, you ended up, the both of us at different times ended up going to see the anchor, okay? Great place. Again, I believe where it's located is a good spot. You know, it's kind of in the downtown area. It's not directly next to a home with a 2-year-old or a child or a grandchild. And that's a concern, is there could be things that are, anything can always happen, but if we can reduce the possibilities of a child getting hurt, somebody getting robbed, I'm not saying they're all bad, they're not, but sometimes if we're looking at drugs, alcohol, and psychological issues, they're not fully through that. And some transitional houses will actually allow their people to still be using and still stay there. So that's an issue. So for instance, like at the anchor, they can actually be using drugs or anything outside and still come in and stay there, because it's that transition going from living on the streets to a facility which is needed. But if they're living outside, I'm going to be honest with you, at my door, I'd be a little scared. And I know you have grandkids, you do. It's a little scary.
Are you talking illegal drugs or, you know, like?
Oh, yeah. They can completely use anything, come in completely high, because they're trying to transition. I get the whole point. It's a great system, but I just don't believe it's within our housing areas where families are going there to live, to be in a safe environment. So,
Mr. Mayor, I have another question. So in cases like that, would Temecula Police not have the ability to go in and treat, I mean, they're going to act like anybody else that's in possession of illegal drugs, right?
That's correct.
I mean, it's still going to, it doesn't make me feel any better, but it's the only recourse that we have, I think, when it comes to state law. So we'll have to address things after the fact, which doesn't make me feel better.
I know. And I just wanted to bring this up as a point. I mean, this was great transition from what we were just talking about last week. This is exactly where our local control needs to happen, because we are the ones who know what our city needs and wants, because our residents talk directly to us, not to the state. Sometimes they do, but.
Mr. Mayor? Yes. So does a transitional housing, do they have to apply for a permit through the city?
No.
No, so
No.
they can literally, it could just pop up and we wouldn't even know it exists.
I have a summary of the law. Jonathan, if you could put up the slide. So there it is. Transitional housing and supportive housing shall be considered a residential use of property and shall be subject only to those restrictions that apply to other residential dwellings of the same type in the same zone. Supportive housing is defined in section 65650, shall be a use by right in all zones where multifamily and mixed uses are permitted, as provided in Article 11, commencing with section 65650.
I'm sorry, can you keep that up there for a second? Subject to only those restrictions that apply to other residential dwellings of the same type in the same zone.
Mm-hmm. Which means you can't treat them in a more strict manner.
Understood, but there's probably some features that we could be exploring regarding code enforcement.
Yeah, that's what I was saying
would
earlier.
help alleviate some of those concerns, right? Because that's the disconnect, right? Is that obviously the state's going to require us to do this, or we don't have a housing element, right?
Correct.
And as a city, we can't proceed without having a housing element. So, you know, at some level, we have to approve this, but can we use this as an opportunity to see if we could wrestle back some of that local control through
Code
you know,
enforcement.
code enforcement and maybe adoption of additional ordinances. And Peter, I'm looking at you for guidance here, but you know, are there additional ordinances or model ordinances that are out there in communities that have transitional housing? Since we don't have that, we haven't had to create ordinances or safeguards in place of that. So are there things that we should be?
When you read the ordinance, it said that exact comment. You can't add something to there that puts a bigger burden on the transitional housing than on other residential housing within the area.
Right.
So the existing laws you have in place to regulate landscaping, trash, all of those kind of things could be enforced against a traditional housing, but you can't put anything special in place that would make it more difficult for them to operate.
Well, I'm not saying more difficult for them to operate. I'm saying there's probably, if I had to guess, gaps in our current ordinances since we don't have transitional housing as part of our city traditionally. We haven't had to develop ordinances over that time to deal with some of the issues that may arise because of transitional housing.
Well, that's what I was trying to say
So I'm not
earlier.
saying that
The staff can certainly pursue that and look at it, but again, the standard is it has to apply across the board.
Well, and I think it could, right? I mean, the standard, I mean, look, the living standards that we would apply to, you know, to those scenarios, we would have the same expectations on anybody in the community regardless, right? So we wouldn't be creating a unique standard necessarily, but I'm just curious for those cities that have, you know, transitional housing and I mean, it's a concern because, you know, we've seen cases, and I'm sure law enforcement and code enforcement in other cities have dealt with this. So if they have done that, are there communities we can look to that have existing ordinances or model ordinances that might help in this situation, rather than just passing, you know, what the state is asking us to without having any sort of backstop or you know, ability to respond?
Mr. Mayor, in that case, I think we should review the code enforcement codes and see if there may be any holes. I don't know of any. We dealt with this a lot during the big foreclosure issues when everybody was in foreclosure, and code enforcement was very busy doing exactly what we said, checking for healthy conditions, checking for overcrowding, checking for fire hazards, like making sure electricity's on, running water, you know, those kinds of things. So, but I think it behooves us to take a look at those and at least get a comfort level with everything code enforcement's doing, and I know they're doing a great job. And off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's missed. But
That's something staff can look into, certainly. We can work with the city attorney and perhaps bring something back to the subcommittee, if that's your desire.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to see that as part of the motion, you know, and Peter, recognizing that we don't want to run afoul of state law here, that's really not the point. The point is if we've never had this as a feature in our community, certainly there are ordinances and things that aren't additionally restrictive to you know, go sideways with the state.
I would
but-
recommend that you just adopt the ordinance as it's written, and then we obviously understand that all 5 of you want us to look at those additional, you know, ways to deal with potential problems on all residential properties.
Yeah, and I would add in there any sort of other additional solutions, right? So, and you know, I would equate this to some of the things that are going on in Old Town with businesses that maybe haven't been in compliance with our ordinances either, right? I mean, what we don't want to have happen, I mean, because this process takes a while, right, to be able to ratchet down on a business that's in non-compliance, and we've seen, I think, the results of some of that and how challenging it can be to work its way through. And that's a tough position to put, you know, your neighboring businesses in, recognizing that we have to go through a legal process in order to, you know, clean things up, if you will. We certainly don't want to have that same challenging, drawn-out process in a residential neighborhood.
well, I know that in this instances of health and safety, it can be automatic. I mean, they can give notice that day, right when they're there to clean up or else. I don't know what the or else is, but.
Well, and that's the challenge. I mean, do we have any enforcement teeth in our existing ordinances? What are we missing that
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just under this hypothetical situation that we're all discussing here, I don't want anyone to believe that transitional housing in a residential neighborhood, which is hypothetical, it doesn't exist today, but if it did, that somehow they are exempt from basic laws that are governing neighborhoods or governing the house that you live next door to, or I live next door to. So I just don't want that to get lost on the conversation that, whether it's a group home, because I think Councilmember Edwards, you've discussed or brought that up.
Yep.
The state allows group homes, and we all know what happens there, but they're not exempt. They don't get a free pass from abiding by the local laws, and RSO's involved when they need to be, code enforcement's involved when they need to be, and the city's involved when we need to be. So I just felt it was important to mention that. There isn't a special exemption, and those laws will apply to this hypothetical.
I think another question I'd like to ask Peter is, what role do HOAs play? They don't have any more teeth in this than we do.
Well,
basically.
generally, for group homes and some of these restrictions, the state law specifically supersedes the HOA rules.
I
So
thought
that's been a habit of the legislature to supersede HOA rules. And the couple of times they've adopted laws that did not deal with HOAs, and then the next year or the year after, they went back and changed it once they realized they'd made a mistake. And I think the city manager makes an excellent point that there's nothing in our current set of laws governing how people take care of their homes or how they conduct themselves that is exempted with the transitional housing. So rules of not keeping up the landscaping, letting the house go downhill, noise, loud parties, all of those kind of things.
Drugs and
would apply.
alcohol would fall into that category, right,
Yeah,
Peter?
right.
Kind of going back, and I'm hearing everything that you guys are saying, and I agree with it. Definitely there's some ordinance I know that can be pushed through. There's a way to be shrewd, and there's a way to get around things when we just got to figure that out. I just don't want to have to see somebody be endangered for us to have to take that next step, because that's really what I believe is going to end up having to be the concern. That's just my concern. Again, this is just my heart. This is where kind of I stand, and I agree 100% with you guys. It's very hard for me to sit here and okay that to be pushed forward. So, but I am supporting you guys with that one as far as I know we can do something on the other end.
Yes.
Fair enough. But this reminds me, Stu, of the short-term vacation rentals, right? I mean, those started popping up in our neighborhoods, largely unnoticed by the city because there was no authority we had, and it just organically sort of emerged. And then it became problematic in the communities. And, and anybody watching, and I'd really encourage our community that, if these things do occur, to reach out to the city, right? Because, or law enforcement or whatever, but make sure that you make us aware of these, because that, I think, was ultimately the path we went down for short-term vacation rentals. A lot of cities just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and do this, and they've been here, and, and they kind of accepted that, and we took a different path. As long as the state doesn't step in and change that for us. But for now, our path is different, and it was largely because, in my opinion, and I'm sure you'd agree, because our community came forward and said, I cannot continue living next to a property that's being used for this purpose. And but it wasn't just, that it was an offensive purpose philosophically, right? It was that they had violation after violation, code issue after legal
Noise
issue,
and parking,
right?
and
And so I think there was, and I think this falls under that same category. And so I'd really encourage, each of us within our respective districts and our community members themselves that as the state, again, continues to erode this, let's, come together a little bit as a community. And if there is an issue, we're here to help and make sure that you still get to have that use and enjoyment of your property in a safe, and quiet neighborhood. And that's why I say, I don't mind, passing this at this point, recognizing that this is going to be added to the list of stuff that we need to address with the state, but also let's see if we can create some backstops in the interim to make sure that we are as prepared as we can be and not having to scramble to put new ordinances on the books, after something, comes up that is objectionable. Yeah. So if somebody wants to craft that into a motion, I'd appreciate it.
Well,
As I say, I would recommend, if
Yeah.
you're interested in adopting the ordinance, you just adopt it. We have very clear direction
Okay.
from the council as to what the staff and I need to do with respect to making sure that there's no specific problems that arise from these or any other uses in the residential zones.
I will move the item, and I'd like to have one more comment to make after the second for discussion.
All right, we have a motion and we need a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Stewart, thank you.
My comment is not adding anything to the motion, but saying, as we do with any dwelling that's problematic, and we have had some houses where we knew that drugs were being sold out of the house and things like that, and we're always on the lookout for trafficking and those types of things, and I think this is going to be one of those things that falls under. I don't want to give the impression that all transitional housing programs are bad, offensive, or bad for neighborhoods. Of course, everybody prefers that they be someplace else, away from children's schools, families, but I don't want to cast aspersions on those transitional housing organizations that do a good job, and especially if they have somebody that lives in the house with the people who are in transition. And they're structured, they have to be structured programs, of course, to do any good anyway. So that's my caveat. The only comfort I get in this is knowing that we have been very strict in the past with residences that have been doing illicit activities, and we've shut down a few drug homes and things like that. So that is the only recourse at this point that we have. And then we can take a look at code enforcement later and see if we see any holes in any areas that have to do with public safety and fire hazards and things like that. So that was my
Understood.
comment.
Understood. And as you mentioned, Mayor, similar to the short-term rentals, it was the phone calls and the formal code complaints that got that going, and that's why we have the ordinance.
Well, it's my understanding, we don't have an ordinance. We just actually started enforcing the single-family code. Did we not?
We clarified,
we
short-term
clarified.
rentals were not listed, so therefore they weren't permitted.
Right.
And we
Correct.
clarified that
Right.
they're not.
Okay, yeah, because that really, we lean back on our existing code, and like you said, we clarified exactly what that was, because it wasn't as clear. And I think that's what we're gonna probably end up doing with this, is we'll be using the existing code that's there for single-family residents, and if it goes outside of that boundary, that's when we're going to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Peter, that's totally, with the same standard we hold any residence or business to as far as safety and those types of things, illegal drug activity.
Yes, if there's
Those will
illegal
apply.
drug activity, if there's any type of illicit activity that's going on, there are remedies that the city has to shut down the house, whether it's transitional housing or single-family house or an apartment building.
And we have.
And we have.
Do they have to request a business license from the city to operate?
I don't think so, but
No, they don't.
we'll double check.
Okay.
That's how we end up not even knowing that they're there.
I mean, not that they would necessarily either, but just curious, yeah.
Just a thought, I mean, even just something to add into while we're just having the discussion. If it's going to be what it's going to be, is there a way maybe the city can incentivize them letting us know that they're there? Some way. I don't know what that would look like. Again, our staff is that amazing. But just to be able to know that there's a facility there, I think would kind of at least help some families in the area know, just to be aware. And also, maybe they'll come out and let us know, hey, we're going to be in this dwelling area. Obviously, there's going to be some areas that need to be conservatively not known to other areas, which is fine, but to people. But I think that's just another possibility we can go down.
At this point in time, I don't know that there's anything we can do to notify the neighbors.
Okay.
Because of the fact that this is set up so that they are allowed to be in a residential zone. And as with all of the other group homes, the city is prohibited from taking some action to make it more difficult for them to be in there.
No, I'm not saying more difficult. I guess my other question is it something that if they want to let us know that they're there, could we put it on our website? So if people want to have an idea that
We'd have to look into that.
that's what I'm saying. Just as an
Yeah.
idea while we're having the discussion.
Yeah, that's a difficult issue for us to deal with.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, I would hope that the reputable ones would do exactly that.
Me too. I agree.
Yeah, and work with the city
Yes.
in selecting and citing a facility. Yeah. All right. Any other comments or questions?
Actually, I need to read the title of the ordinance.
Yes, sir.
This to be an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Temecula, amending Titles 15 and 17 of the Temecula Municipal Code to 1, comply with state law changes to large family daycare homes, 2, clarify the standards that apply to senior housing, transitional housing, supportive housing, emergency shelters, trash enclosures, self-storage or mini warehouse facilities, and to projects using the Affordable Housing Overlay Zone. 3, establish standards and requirements for dedications and improvements for developments without a subdivision. 4, update how development impact fees can be used. 5, clarify where artificial turf can be installed. And 6, make minor typographical edits and finding that this ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to CEQA Guidelines, Section 15061B3.
All right, go ahead and cast your votes. Okay, and that passes 4-1. All right, moving on to item number 13, introduce an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning of the municipal code to revise multifamily definition and require that multifamily and mixed-use developments comply with objective design standards and adopt a resolution to establish objective design standards for multifamily and mixed-use development consistent with state housing law. Can we have a staff report on this one?
You may. Hi again. So these are the objective design standards for multifamily and mixed-use development. As we're all familiar, the state continues to pass laws that accelerate housing production by streamlining the approval process at the local level. And a sampling of those laws include the Housing Accountability Act, which was passed in 2017, SB 35, which went into effect 2018, SB 330 in 2020, and the SB 9, which went into effect January 1st, 2022. So all of those streamline the approval process. So a streamlined approval process for affordable housing, for an affordable housing project includes a ministerial act, so it's either yes or no based on very specific requirements. There's no discretionary review. There's no CEQA or environmental review. There's no public hearing. And the city may only apply objective design standards. So objective design standards, essentially the meaning of that is they're objective, they can be measured. So a lot of our specific plans or PDOs have a combination of subjective and objective standards. Subjective, just an example, would include language such as may, should, or recommend. An example of that would be a proposed housing development should fit the character of the community, so very subjective, whereas an objective would include Spanish-style buildings shall have a low-pitch roof, 412 maximum. So we can tell whether or not it's consistent with those objective standards. So applicability, these standards apply to all multifamily and mixed-use housing developments not covered by a specific plan or PDO, Plan Development Overlay. And these standards would apply citywide to projects that qualify per state law, those laws that I mentioned, and then require ministerial approval. So with that, what I'll do is I'm going to turn it over to Alan Loomis, our consultant with PlaceWorks, who helped us craft these objective design standards.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Pleasure to be here tonight. Had a great experience working with your planning staff on this project, so kudos to can't say enough great things about your staff. That'd be the short version of it. Is itemized or detailed out in a staff report. One of the significant components of our scope of work was to develop a family of architectural styles that would be defined according to these objective design standards that would meet that threshold, so that as projects did come forward in the community, you could apply some form of architectural styling to them. And so we began our process by looking at up to 12 different styles as an inventory. We vetted those down to ultimately 6 styles that we ended up developing. And so there was a number of kind of processes involved in why some of the 6 got eliminated, and these 6 remain that we can go into if you have questions. But in terms of the design standards document itself, which is the colorful booklet in your package, this is the document that would be adopted via resolution. I'll give you a very high-level overview of this and how it's structured and how we approached the problem of objective design standards for the issue of architectural design, which is in many cases a very subjective kind of process. The document has, as you can see here, there's a table of contents, has 10 chapters. As typical with these kinds of books and documents, the first chapter and the last chapter are really administrative, setting the stage for the document. Chapter 2 on site design standards, this is where we'll find all the kind of criteria related to the layout of parking lots, the issues of like ganged mailboxes, site utilities, trash enclosures, all those kinds of things that are going to be common for any development relative to their site design. Those standards are all encapsulated in Chapter 2. Chapter 3 addresses issues of building articulation and building form, as well as the issues of garage doors as they might face onto kind of an alleyway, if you will. And then the remaining chapters detail out all the 6 architectural styles that were selected with the assistance of staff and the 2 subcommittees. And so they're all structured very similarly. So I'll go through the very first one, which is the Mission or Spanish Colonial Revival style, kind of give you an overview of how we approached this problem and the different styles. So each style starts off with this kind of image. We call it the hero image, and it's intended to kind of convey the general feel of these kinds of styles. It's kind of historical pedigree and just an opening definition of them. And then we move forward through a series of different topics that an architect or a builder would have to think about as they're designing and assembling a building. And so the first is to deal with the scale of the building and its form and massing. And so we detail out a number of required elements, and then in almost all cases in the different sections, we'll have a set of optional elements. And so here you can see in this case, there are 2 optional elements, and the developer has to choose at least one of those in addition to the 4 required elements. Then we move on to the issue of roof designs. And so Spanish Colonial Revival has a number of very distinct characteristics related to the roof design, such as the Spanish tile clay roofs being low pitched. So that's detailed out as a required elements. And then in this case, we have 4 different options of kind of optional elements, and the developer has to choose at least 2. And part of the thinking on these kind of optional elements is that, you know, oftentimes developers or builders, if they're just given a list of these are just the things you have to do, they just throw it all into one project, and it looks kind of like, it doesn't look artistic, it doesn't look like it has flair. And so we're trying to give some options so that individual architects can kind of play with these kind of components and develop something that both meets these standards, but also has some variety within individual buildings, so the city doesn't end up being cookie cutter based on the application of these standards. So another section deals with walls and windows. So again, a series of required elements and a collection of optional elements. And each one of the styles has a different combination and a different articulation under this general topic. So if you look at Craftsman, the kind of collection of required elements and optional elements in Craftsman is obviously different in this section than it is for Spanish Revival. Materials and colors. In the Spanish Revival section, style is pretty limited. It's basically a collection of whites and off-whites and dark window frames. And the other styles, there's a lot broader range of colors and material options. And then we also had a collection of decorative accents. And again, these vary based on the different styles. So somewhere between 12 and 10 different decorative accents, depending on the style. And so in this case, we initially said choose 4, that's what's on the slide, but based on direction and Planning Commission and the subcommittees, the document that you'd be adopting actually says choose 6. So we've upped that requirement. So developer would look at this and say, what are the 6 of these decorative accents they want to apply to their project? And then finally, on all of the styles, we have 2 additional sections, and I'm highlighting just one here. This is the mixed-use elements. So the SB 35, the law, it sort of kicks this off, says that a mixed-use project with affordable housing component is can request or is eligible for this ministerial action. And so we felt like we needed to address the mixed-use elements. So each of the styles has a page that addresses kind of the unique characteristics of mixed-use development that are appropriate to that style. And then we also added in another one that deals with duplexes or triplexes. So that's another one that got added in. And so that relates to, as part of the zoning code amendment or ordinance that you're adopting, that changes the definition of multifamily from 3 units down to 2 units, and is a reaction to SB 9. So we're trying to get ahead of that. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt and stay up here to answer questions.
So to conclude, the proposed project is exempt from CEQA under Section 15061B3. And this was presented to both the Planning Commission and the City Council subcommittees, and the Planning Commission recommended approval on December 1st, 2021 with a vote 5-0. And staff recommends the City Council approve the ordinance and the resolution to adopt the objective design standards. And that concludes the presentation. Both Alan and myself are happy to answer questions.
All right, let's get started with questions. Any questions from council?
I have one.
Ms. Edwards.
Well, thank you, and they do look beautiful. I know when we met, I think the only concern that I expressed was the austere appearance of the exteriors of some of them, specifically the ones that have windows, and it's not the windows that are, recessed, but it's when they have standard windows and there's no kind of trim or accent or, bump out around the windows. And so is it a matter of style that dictates that?
Typically, that would be the answer. So certain styles don't have the surround, like Spanish Revival often doesn't have a surround.
Right,
and
I noticed that too.
Yeah, whereas like Craftsman often will have a surround.
Right.
So one of the things we did, and it's not addressed in the style, but we do say that there is a minimum recess. So it should be, if it's a stucco wall, then it's a minimum recess of 3 inches. If it's a wood wall, then it's between 3 and 6. And if it's a masonry wall or a stone wall, then it should be between 6 and 12.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. The more recess, you can get away with it, because that is that breaks up that long expanse of flat walls on the sides of the building. So I just wondered why we didn't include it. I still like to see the trim. And in fact, the city of Temecula, after we had a couple of developments built in Temecula, I remember that with Paseo del Sol, the city actually required that there was something around all the windows that, popped out. So just curious.
Yeah, like I said, it's typically a stylistic issue, whether you would have the trim or not.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to get this one right. I am going to open the public hearing. And do we have any comments?
We do not.
All right, do we have any? Close that public hearing. I'm going to do that first.
Yes.
All right, and then do we have any comments from council?
I'll move the item.
I think it looks beautiful, by the way. I agree with Marianne. It's very pretty.
All right, and I will just say that the one comment I do have is, again, this, at least from staff's perspective, and thank you again for all your help with this. It's been fun listening to all your architectural wisdom. I've learned a lot. But this is one of those opportunities for us to at least wrestle back a little bit of control and at least create these objective design standards for projects that we may not have anything but ministerial control over, but at least we'll ensure that the project meets the standards of what we expect to see within the city, and we won't end up with a bunch of corrugated metal boxes. So I appreciate the work on all of that.
And Mr. Mayor, that's what sets Temecula apart.
The corrugated, oh, yeah, yes.
Not
Yes,
the
it does.
corrugated boxes, no.
Absolutely.
If I may, that's one of the characteristics that came through very clearly working with staff and the subcommittees is the very high bar you set for architecture and design in Temecula. And on my trip here this evening, I drove through some of your neighboring communities who will be left unnamed. But there's a very distinct difference when you arrive in Temecula. You
Yeah.
tell the design quality goes way up.
Good to hear. Thank you. All right, and do we have to read this one?
Yes,
as
I
well?
have to read the ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, we only have a first from Councilmember Schwinn. Okay.
Yeah, Stu, sorry.
Okay, this would be an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Temecula amending Title 17 zoning of the Temecula Municipal Code to revise the multifamily definition and require that multifamily and mixed-use developments comply with objective design standards, and make the finding that this ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15061B3 and Government Code Section 65852.21J and 66411.7N, Long Range Planning Project Number LR 18-1684. And then also as part of the motion, it should be to introduce the ordinance and approve the resolution that approves the objective design standards. Those can be done in one motion.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second, and please cast your votes if you haven't already.
And everyone voted, and it is unanimous.
All right, so that passes 5-0. Thank you so much. All right, moving on, we are, make sure, onto item, business items. Okay, can we play the video for this one, please?
Any member of the public may address the City Council on items that appear on the business portion of the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting by submitting a speaker card to the city clerk or by submitting an email to be read aloud into the record at the meeting. Email comments must be submitted to councilcomments@temeculaca.gov. Speaker cards for in-person comments will be called in the order received by the city clerk, and then, if time remains, email comments will be read. Email comments on all matters must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comments. All public participation is governed by the council policy regarding public participation at meetings adopted by resolution number 2021-54.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this evening we only have one item to appoint member to the Race, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Commission. And I believe we had a member since our last meeting step down, Imelda.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll just provide you with a brief staff report for the record. Effective January 14th, 2022, former Ready Commissioner Imelda Huerta resigned her position on the commission due to a schedule change with her new employment, creating a vacancy on the 7-member commission. The City Council conducted its annual appointment process for all boards and commissions, including the Ready Commission, at the December 14th, 2021 meeting, less than 60 days prior to the current vacancy. Those vacancies were advertised and recruited for utilizing a variety of methods, including but not limited to the printed newspaper, city website, Channel 3, social media, and community stakeholder platforms. The application for those vacancies was September 1st through October 31st, 2021. Pursuant to council policy, since the vacancy on the Ready Commission is occurring within the 60-day period from the previous appointments, it is recommended that the City Council consider the Ready Commission applications submitted during that particular period and appoint a member to the commission. The term of the appointment for this particular member will be from January 25th, 2022 through December 31st, 2023, matching the term of the vacancy. And with that, Mr. Mayor, we would ask that you facilitate the appointment process.
Okay, thank you. So you should have all gotten packets back, information from the last round of candidates. And so I think this time around, since we have one vacancy, I'd just be looking to see if we can reach consensus on what name you'd like to see move forward on that. So in random order, I think I'll just, since I'm looking at Mary Ann, I will just start down on the left and see what you have to say.
Do you want only one?
If we could start there and see what happens.
Okay, then, I was just writing and circling, sorry. I reviewed the applications and looked back to the interviews that we conducted, and my recommendation is for Lyman Lectures.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stewart?
I am going to go with Jonathan Fleetstra.
Jonathan Fleitstra. Yes, sir. Mr. Schwenk?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I went back to the YouTube video to sort of rewatch some of the interviews, and this person, one of the things they said is they were new to Temecula. Their family was already here, but they personally were new. I think that's valuable. 40 years plus career working with vulnerable populations on equity and justice issues. One thing that this person said at the very end, which just really resonates with me, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, this is our watch, this is our time to leave Temecula better for our children. And then one last thing that I feel is important is if you look at the current commission, District 5 is omitted. There's not a District 5 representative, and this person does live in District 5, and that is Lyman Lecters.
Lyman Lecters, okay. Ms. Alexander?
My pick was Marty J. Nicholson for that one.
J. Nicholson.
Very diverse, has worked with people with special needs and an attorney, and a lot of great background, very diverse, which I really enjoyed reading over her resume and then remembering when she came up, so.
Great. Okay, so I get the unenviable position. So no, I agree. Marty had a remarkable background. She was one of the ones that I had identified as well. I also identified Lyman Lecters as well as a good candidate. Again, going back to the pool of folks, we had just a remarkable group of people come forward. So I would be happy to see Mr. Lecters give the opportunity to serve the community. So that's 3 of us. So if that's the case, maybe, do we need a motion on this, or, yeah?
Yeah, we do need to go ahead and vote. This is kind of the general discussion portion, but then we need to go ahead and have the vote.
Okay.
So we'll need a motion and a second.
So I move that the council appoint Lyman Lecters to the vacancy on the Ready Commission.
And I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote. Okay, and that passes 5-0. Thank you so much. That was easy. Okay, do we have any items for future city council agendas that anybody'd like to bring up this evening? All right, seeing none, let's move on to city manager's report.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. City attorney?
No further report.
Okay, well then, I would like to go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting in the memory of Jacob Flores. Thank you.